The legal consequences of the construction of a wall in the occupied Palestinian territory, United Nations v. Israel, by Chloe Polisci and Baron Caraballo. The key parties that were involved during the proceedings of this case were the United Nations as the plaintiff and the government of Israel as the defendant. The International Court of Justice, or the ICJ, was involved for providing advisory opinion on the case. In June 2002, the Israeli government approved the construction of a wall in the West Bank. This impaired the freedom of the Palestinian population, the details of which will be discussed further in the video. The UN General Assembly demanded that the construction of the wall be stopped. In July 2004, ICJ was asked by the General Assembly to provide an advisory opinion on the matter. When tackling the issue of the legal consequences of the construction of this wall, the General Assembly and the ICJ took into consideration the wall's possible violation of international law, including the Fourth Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, and relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. Israel argued that the construction of a wall in the West Bank would act as a barrier against attacks on Israeli civilians. The government also stated that it was willing to provide compensation and services for Palestinian residents, and that the wall was intended to be a temporary structure. The growing concern for the safety of Israeli civilians at the time of the construction of the wall could be attributed to the heightened attacks on Israel. Israel experienced the highest rate of suicide bombings in 2001 and 2002. The construction of the wall was designed to be a barrier against this increase of anti-Israeli political violence. The arguments put forward by the UN stated that the wall impaired the freedom of the Palestinian population living in the area. The wall was argued to be in violation of international law. The areas and cases of international law that the wall was accused of violating was the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949, the Hague Convention, relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, Article 12 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The issue of the construction of the wall by Israel in Palestinian territory was found to be in violation of international law. This included violations against the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949, the Hague Convention, and relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. The wall obstructed the movement of people residing in the enclosed territory, which infringed on Article 12 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It affected access to work, health, facilities, education, and adequate standard of living under the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. The wall also changed the demography of the territory due to the departure of some Palestinians that were living in the area. This violated Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. The wall also breached Israel's obligations under the Fourth Geneva Convention and the Hague Convention because the route chosen infringed on the rights of the Palestinians in the territory. Furthermore, both Israel and Palestine were under obligation to observe the rules of international law, as illegal actions had occurred on both sides. A separate opinion by Judge Bergenthal was raised against the decision to look for advice from ICJ. He argued that ICJ failed to address Israel's arguments on the construction of the wall. Furthermore, he argued that the ICJ missed the bigger picture when looking into the issue.